Welcome to my virtual campfire. I'm Crystal Kelly. It is times like these that our ancestors would have started telling stories around a campfire, searching for meaning in our existence. We all have our Corona stories to tell. Think of our phone as the warm glow of a virtual campfire. Each week, listen to stories from all over the world about how we, as humans, fit into the vibrations of Mother Nature and the universe. Collectively, let's co-create a future through conversation and storytelling and music. With love.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right. So Eric, you're here in Seattle along with, I'm in Seattle as well. And Viv, you are in Australia. Is that right?
Yeah, Sydney, Australia right now.
Well, thank you so much for joining my campfire today.
Pleasure.
Yeah, no problem. We've been a part of I think everybody has these days, part of a global campfire that's occurring.
Exactly. That's exactly. We're all hopping on board and connecting. And I was looking at your guys' website, 1iOPEN, and I was really impressed that you've been to every continent, including Antarctica. Yeah. And I just want to know what drives you guys to make these amazing productions that you make, and where it all started, where it's all going.
Yeah, I'll let Viv actually answer the question. I was just going to say we've been, we love that we've been to all 7 continents, but there's the discussion there might be an 8th one scientifically emerging. We've been on that one too, just in case somebody's counting.
And where's that?
Over in the New Zealand Pacific Islands, there's a discussion about that. But for us, it's that we've worked on all 7 continents is the big deal for us. And our origin story, speaking of the 8th continent over there by New Zealand, starts, in New Zealand, where Viv and I ran into each other, were thrown into the cauldron.
Yeah, we met in New Zealand on a TV show that was about adventure racing, and that show went all over the world. And Eric had been on the production already for a couple of months, and I was fresh off the boat. I was a young kid, kind of fresh out of film school. I was 20, 21 maybe, and just kind of, I had a passport. That's at least, there were 2 juniors that were hired at this company to kind of just do some basic junior stuff, and they had a last minute request for someone to go to New Zealand who had a valid passport. And I kind of threw my hand up. The other fellow that was hired at the same time as me, also 21, he didn't have a passport. And my boss turned to me and said, right, you're on the plane to New Zealand. And that's where I met Eric. So the lesson from that is always have your passport ready to go.
I'm right with you, Viv. I started in TV production when I was 19, and it was a really similar thing. It was like, oh, who's available for this shoot? And I'm like, I'm always available. So I got to go on lots of things that were very spontaneous, and I think always having your passport is really good advice for anybody.
It's an interesting one because a lot of people will ask, how can I get into adventure film, or how can I get into film, and what did you do? And unfortunately, it's a really hard question to answer because, as I'm sure you're aware, you can't really replicate it, particularly when there's random moments like that. So the passport becomes this greater metaphor for kind of be ready to seize random opportunities.
Yeah, my motto is I go where the day takes me. And then sometimes I end up in like some random place somewhere in the world.
Yeah, you can control a certain amount, like having your passport and control that. But beyond that, just be ready to go where the day takes you. I like that.
So one thing that I know just from doing on location things, I've never gone as remote. Well, Siberia is pretty remote. I did a documentary in Siberia, and that was very remote. And there were lots of challenges, and I didn't have the product that I had in my head when I started. And so it goes. But one thing I know about that is you always have to be creative. You have to use your resources in like the most random ways, and things become tools that
maybe you were almost going to throw away. And tell me a little bit about how your creativity plays into the production of what you guys are working on.
When we seasoned cameramen, etc., I'd been filming adventure racing for quite a long time, and I'd been, for this production Viv's talking about, in Tasmania for a month, in Ecuador, and then I'm rolling up in New Zealand, and we're a bit grizzled and dirty, and etc. And you ask, how do you improvise, adapt, overcome, make this happen out of nothing? We always had a saying that you can tell who the real cameraman is or field producer because their stuff is all duct taped together, zip tied, their clothes are torn up, and they look like crap. You see these people come on set that look pro, and they're new.
It's so true.
And so, to answer your question directly, I feel that when you do these kinds of things, this adventure film production, what Viv and I are doing right now, building a mobile app, etc. I myself have always been attracted to these kinds of projects that don't have a clear path, and I think that in trying to do these productions in the field, they're all kind of metaphors on life. It's you can do life a lot better if you challenge yourself in this way. And then you find out as you get a little older, and in Viv's case, not much older, that life is actually like that. There is no path. There's no clear way to do this. And anybody who's telling you that is just hiding from you what it really took to do what they're doing. There's duct tape and zip ties putting this sort of thing together, and this life, no matter how sophisticated you might think it is.
I'll tell you a quick story to kind of give a real example of what Eric's kind of talking about. We were shooting a ski film in northern China, in Xinjiang, which, if you've been following the news or even just following the film Mulan, you'll realize that this is a really hotly contested part of the world. There's China has really locked it down. Journalists can't really get in and out of the area. Of course, there's some horrific stories coming out of what they're doing to the Uyghur population there. But we got this kind of strange window into this place. We were invited in by the Chinese government to make a ski film there. And so it was this kind of extraordinary moment of kind of coming into this world that no one really knew much about, and the ability to plan for it was basically non-existent. We asked if there were helicopters, and they said yes. We get there, and they said, oh, the helicopter doesn't fly in winter. And you're like, well, you wanted a ski film. When does the ski film get shot? And so on and on it went. And Eric was trying to get, access to the top of the mountain. And we had people telling us that the horses could go up there. And we're like, what superhuman horses do you have? And on it went. We had, they had skidoos that they didn't know how to ride. They'd just kind of flown in from Canada. So we had to teach them how to ride skidoos. And ultimately, to kind of finally answer your question here, we ended up making a big pivot during the production to embrace all of this behind the scenes stuff into the film. So much was happening and so much was changing. We couldn't fly athletes to the top of the mountain to ski down. So they were having to path and route find themselves. They were having to dig their own avalanche pits. We were teaching people how to ride skidoos. We were having discussions with the local tribesmen, all of which we felt was extraordinarily interesting, particularly in a region that the world doesn't get eyes on much. And so we made that decision on the spot, standing in the snow in northern China, to include all of that behind the scenes into the film. So that was one example of how we pivoted and embraced the chaos.
Yeah, I think that, when we left the United States, Vivid wrangled up, I think 5 or 6 international skiers and snowboarders, some of them on national ski teams, Olympic teams, etc. And we told them we're going to go ski in this region. And I remember getting on the plane and looking at Viv. I mean, not directly because she was in Australia, but just basically getting on the phone and saying, do you think you can do all that bullshit we just said we can do in this place we've never been with these people we don't know? And we just, we'd been through enough at that point doing this sort of thing. It was just like, you know what? We'll figure it out. and it turned out spectacular.
I love that. I had a director, and he used to, when things would go wrong, he'd be like, "Smoke and mirrors, folks, smoke and mirrors." And it was just kind of our motto, where we like, okay, well, we're on live TV and we got to make this look good, and so pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and rewriting your story midway through is like, that's super awesome. That's kind of, I feel like that pivot that you're talking about is a little bit what everybody's doing right now in Corona. We're reinventing our way of life. And tell me how you're going to pivot with what you guys do and how you're handling this.
I would like Viv to start that with why she's in Sydney. Because we both worked here in Seattle, and she moved down to LA to expand what we're doing, and I'll let her take that one.
Yeah, I'd very much lived the last 5 years committed to the United States. I had a green card approved and in process, waiting for an interview. I'd been in the US for 5 years. Of course, I had co-owned a business here, and I'd lived in Seattle, just made the move to LA to kind of continue our film journey there. And I had come back to Australia this time last year, actually, for 6 days to attend a film festival in Australia that we had a film in, and see my folks, of course. So 6 days, I'd only taken a backpack, a carry-on with my laptop and a change of underwear, and the borders shut, and the festival was cancelled. 24 hours later, I'm on the phone to Eric, and I'm standing in Sydney Airport. United had stopped flying, Delta had stopped flying, Qantas had its last flight out, and I was on the last flight out of it on American Airlines. And I'm telling Eric, I'm saying, the man at the counter is telling me that it's chaos in Los Angeles. These are the last flights out. Then the planes are grounded, and he's telling me that I should stay where I have my health insurance, which of course in Australia we get that. Not to rub that in, Americans, but and Eric's kind of telling me, just, I don't know what to do. No, who knows what to do in a pandemic and like this? I mean, if you can rewind the clock back a year, I mean, sure, we all know what to do now, but at the time, we didn't know. We didn't know, and so I made a call to stay, and of course the borders shut, the planes were grounded, and I've been here ever since. And it's we can't do our job over Zoom. You just heard the story about us making ski films in northern China, so we got grounded and we got stuck behind laptops, and I'll let Eric tell you about how we turned our TV show idea.
Well, I want to bookend what Viv said, because I think it just makes that decision she made and how she ended up there even more substantial. Prior to going there, we were on our way to India, to Delhi, to do a job, to film, and we were going to meet in Delhi, and so she was going to stop to Sydney, and although that's probably not the way you take from LA, she wanted to do a stop there and do the film festival, and I was going to meet her in Delhi, and then we were pretty much had planned out pretty loosely. We come home for a week or so, but essentially I think Viv, we're going to do Delhi, and then I think we're going to
do shoot in Aspen.
So skiing to shoot in Aspen, so back to the United States, and then we had some things we're going to be lining up in Kuala Lumpur, Ho Chi Minh City. We're going to stop in Hong Kong for a thing, and I think we'd have been ending up in June back here. And you're also talking a lot of money for all those projects. In 10 hours, it all disappeared, completely gone. So that kind of is the front end of what Viv was sitting in Sydney making that decision on. Is like, it was surreal, and it was like, what do you do? And to bookend the end of that, the back end of that is, so she's in Sydney, and we're still thinking, okay, this might only be a couple months. Let's try and see if we can salvage our work or some of it. And as time, started writing on the wall, that wasn't going to be a thing. And we're like, shoot, well, maybe what we need to do is, one, figure out how to eat and pay the mortgage. That was a big deal. And what are we going to do? And then also, how are we going to continue our work, and what work are we going to do? And so we looked at okay, we have some projects that we want to work on, some television shows, some scripts. I mean, they all need writing. None of them make money being written. That's just the cost in. But at least we can keep doing that while we try to piece together work. So we started doing piecework, a lot of editing work online, which, we're piecing together, dollars here and dollars there. And we started working on this television show with our good friend Charlie Hartsock. And the show was around going and visiting these places where these films have been filmed with a host. And the host would kind of take you through, like, this is a spot where he did this or she did that. And this is a place nearby where you can eat, and you can kind of, evening magazine it. For those of you who don't know, it's kind of like a show that shows you the region and everything that can be done there besides the thing, which is the film location. And so we started working on that. And as we began working on it, we realized, as the writing became on the wall with COVID, we could sit here and write on this, and we're probably not going to go into production for a year, 2 years, 3 years, who knows? And we thought, oh man, what else can we do? And then we thought, this would really be cool once we got it going, to promote it with some kind of website or app about film locations. So when people watch a show, they can then go out and actually visit the place, and we can tell them where it is with some sort of a digital medium. And that's how we came about deciding to build our app that we just released on Google Play and on to the Apple Store, Set Jetters. You could literally look that up and download it and use it and go visit movie locations. We've released right now what is called the minimum viable product, like the smallest, most compact thing we could build to test it and see, validate what we're doing. That's out to the public right now. And we pivoted in the spring of 2020 to start building that. We started physically building it in October, and we've got to this point from October 2020 to now, to releasing the app. And we are just concluded our first fundraising round. And we're going to go into validation. We're working in New Zealand as our focal point of our MVP. And that's what we're doing. And that's how we've ended up here right now, with this weird life cycle of production and media.
I love that. I quite a few years ago, I had gone down to Peru, and I did a medicine ceremony with San Pedro with a medicine woman there. And at the, went through the whole ceremony and everything. And kind of my conclusion that I took from it, from my journal, from just the whole ceremonial process. And it was that I'm supposed to tell other people's stories. And I'm a writer, so I thought I was supposed to write other people's stories. And so for like quite a few years, I was very confused how I was going to pull this off. I'm like, if this is like my mission, how am I supposed to do this? And and during coronavirus, I was able to like meditate a lot more and just kind of have, more time on my hands. And I realized one day, I was like, wait, I'm not supposed to write people's stories. I'm just supposed to listen to people telling me the stories. And I'm the bridge, the connector to bring them to, the world. And so that's how I came up with the concept of this podcast, and why I'm listening to all these stories from you guys, because I think that this is how, it's funny how things take shape that you didn't expect at all. I wasn't really prepared to flip the camera around onto me at all. I've always kind of been behind the scenes.
It's been an interesting process, I guess, watching it, because it sounds great now. I'm talking to you exactly a year later, and we did this cool COVID pivot, and we built an app from one of our TV show ideas. The reality was, this time last year, it was depressing and scary, and there was hardly I was in a state to be creative, and Eric and I were just like. And our mission, I remember my mind getting so focused on, I just got to get back to the US. I had an apartment there, all my stuff. I think I had washing hanging out to dry. And I was, slowly at one point, my friend said, do you want me to bring your washing in? And I was like, oh yeah, I guess. So we were living in this very kind of, it was a state of distress and panic. And I know that for a lot of people around the world, there's a lot of displaced refugees, and they're kind of sitting there going, yeah, I know, that's my day-to-day life. Welcome to the program. And I do have a lot of sympathy, having gone through just an iota of that feeling. And so it sounds great to listen to these stories, but it is a journey. It is kind of this process of like, there was this kind of this freak out to kind of get through, and then it's been this slow. Now, we sound very positive and enthusiastic, but everybody out there that hasn't got to that point yet, be patient with yourself, I think is what I'm trying to say. And everyone's COVID journey, you might just be starting a COVID journey. I know there are some parts of the world that, it's still in a lockdown, and there's all this kind of second viruses and mutations. So be patient with yourself. If you haven't built an app, don't worry, you don't have to.
It's really true. I think patience is one of those things that, it's easier said than done a lot of times. We tend to work ourselves up and have expectations. And I think the moment I just realized I was just going to release all expectations, like I don't even, nothing would faze me at that point, is when I finally just jumped off and I was like, I'm just going to start this, so.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I want to ask you guys, because to me, this is a huge mystery. Antarctica is, it's a mysterious place. I feel like I've been really drawn to go there, but I haven't had the opportunity yet. And I know at some point I will get that opportunity in my life, but I would love to hear more about your experience in Antarctica, and maybe if you can talk about the project you were working on there or anything like that, because it's something that really fascinates me.
Yeah. Well, why don't you start, Eric? Because it did start with you and someone you met on the phone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you make a good point, Viv, to go back that far on that story, because it again explains to people when they ask, how do you do this? How do you get there? So this might be a slightly long-winded on the front end, and we can get to the sexy parts of Antarctica itself. But I think it's a good moment for anybody doing anything in life, as we've discussed. We worked a lot in India. So this is another point at which we were in India doing some work. And I was getting flights booked. I was working with a tourism company that's working for the Indian government. The Indian government was bringing us over to was it Himachal Pradesh? I'm probably mispronouncing that, as I do.
Pradesh, but that's all right.
I mispronounce everything constantly. Anyways, so we were trying to get over there, and working with this tour outfit that books tickets. They have the contract with Tourism India. And I'm talking with a guy, and he's asking, what are you doing? Why are you going over there, etc., because he's just curious, and started letting him know about it. And when I said, you can check out what we do on our website over at YouTube or whatever, and because we have all these YouTube videos of the behind all this crap we're talking about. A lot of it sounds surreal. Like, for instance, I've wrestled a guy up in this Kazakh guy up in the hills between China and Russia or Mongolia, and so this has happened. These are all documented from behind the scenes videos. Anyways, this guy was looking into these videos, and he thought that was really cool what we did. And he said, I run this tour outfit, and I really want to talk to you more about what you do. Had that conversation. Then it was about, I was having coffee with somebody, I don't know, 4 or 5 months later. And I get this phone call, and it's this gentleman, and he goes, "Hey, Eric." I was, "Oh, hey, how you doing? It's been forever." And he goes, "Hey, would you guys want to go to Antarctica?" And I'm like, "Yeah." What's the catch? what's going on. And so it was this kind of random conversation that we had over an entirely different subject, of which I took the opportunity to let him know about us. And then months later, he gives a call and says, "Do you want to go to Antarctica?" And I was like, "Sure, we'll head down there." And it's very typical in what we do that you're making last minute plans and you're jumping on flights, etc. I can't remember, Viv, but I think we were like got our tickets 3, 4, 5 days before we left. We're never quite sure if it was a deal. This happened in Okinawa when we went to go work with the special forces. I think we got our tickets 2 days before we left. So you're making life plans and financial plans, and you don't even know if it's going to happen. And we yeah.
To just explain a bit, he was launching his own tour down there, an expedition. He just kind of there was a ship going down there. He wanted to see if he could kind of create an expedition down there, and he wanted us to kind of document what he could kind of sell and put together as a tour. He had kind of so yeah, we were basically coming down as a film crew to film the Antarctic experience, was what he was asking us to do.
Yeah, so we got this. We got these tickets and we bounced down to Buenos Aires, and I think we spent a day or two in Buenos Aires, and then we popped down to Ushuaia, and we again, I don't want to be preachy, but another life lesson is take advantage of every moment in your life you have. So when we were in Buenos Aires, we went out and experienced and filmed it. When we got to Ushuaia, we went out and we experienced it and captured it. And some of the things we did there, we discovered an exotic mushroom there that was pretty amazing, that has its entire own backstory that we filmed. But we got down there to Ushuaia and we jumped on the ship with this complete stranger, basically, and we crossed the channel down there, the strait, and
the Drake's Passage, if you're familiar.
Yeah, the Drake's Passage. And I think Viv might be better to tell some of this story, because I think you talked about how it's a mysterious place and how it evokes these kind of emotions and things. I had a couple moments down there caught on camera that Viv, when she went back through the footage, she's like, "Did you see yourself here, bro?" It was an interesting experience for me, I thought.
Yeah, I often say to people, when they ask me about Antarctica, it's sadly the cleanest place on earth I've ever been, and it's probably our last example of what happens when humans don't get in our own way, unfortunately. And the air is clean on a level I don't think we experience up in the rest of our sphere, and the water is just stunningly clean. And of course, there's just really no signs of human life. There's a couple of little bases that you'll see around that the kind of ship will pass, and you'll see, like a science base or something, but and so untouched and interrupted by humans that you can just walk up to penguins. They haven't identified us as a threat yet, and they'll just walk like there's a wild animal. You can't ever anywhere else walk that blazingly close. They'll just kind of almost like expect you to get out of their way. Like they'll walk up to you and then kind of stop and be like, "Why is this thing not moving?" And it's extraordinary. So I think that those are the first unusual things that struck me was what happened, the lack of human impact. And then of course the landscape itself. I mean, if you've been to like Alaska or the Himalayas or the Swiss Alps, I mean, it's on that level of kind of epic grandeur. There's not a ski lift on the side of it, and there's not a car park at the bottom, and it really gives you that spooky, chilled feeling, particularly going down there on a ship. You're kind of on this final frontier, really. I think it's our Earth's final frontier, really.
Yeah, I found the experience when I go to these places. I mean, I love the natural environment and it awes me and everything, but I really attach to the human experience that has occurred in a region, and for me, crossing the passage, being in these areas of Antarctica, but particularly the passage, and being on a ship, I kind of almost like, I don't know, I just get into this place of imagination, because Viv and I come from an imaginative craft. And I can evoke these kind of, images in my head and what it must have been like and what the person must have felt at that moment in this little tiny wooden boat, etc. And when I really start to think about it and you reflect on your own life and you reflect on your trajectory and what you're doing, and it really, for me, it made me take pause of a lot of, meaning and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and really absorbing the experiences internally a lot, and realizing, how much that internalization, crafts me as a person. I got pretty into it, and is just had a huge appreciation for my life in the middle of the water in Drake's Passage.
So would you say it borderlined a spiritual experience, possibly?
No, if you knew me better, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
No, I think what you've got to sit with Eric a bit. He doesn't. I actually would throw you under the bus there, Eric, and say you are a spiritual person. I've been with Eric he's bathed himself in the Ganges. He's been there with us in Jordan and thrown himself into the same place where Jesus baptized himself. I've seen him build cairns on the kind of side of Mount Everest. But we don't want to ruin Eric's tough guy image too much. But he does very much connect with, I think, these places, and they do evoke these thoughts and these feelings. And I would say, if you do go to Antarctica and you're looking into it, it is a very different travel experience to kind of anywhere else in the world. There is no culture and there's no food. So this idea of, when you think about traveling to South America and throughout Europe, you're not going to get those wonderful tapas dishes and see people dancing in the streets. None of that. So you are interacting with the environment on a very extreme level. So read up about the albatross before you go, because you're going to see albatross up close and you're going to see penguins up close.
I was a penguin wrangler on one day of my life. Funny enough, I got stuck in a studio with penguins, and I was the lowest person on the totem pole. So I had to watch these penguins for like an hour. And it was one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. I don't think they're really afraid of people, even when they're in zoos and stuff. I think that they just are like these crazy little things. It was like wrangling cats, like on like to the 10th degree, It was...
Yeah, it's extraordinary. You can get quite close to a lot of even the seals, you can kind of like, they would just lie in these big kind of colonies on the beach, and you can get up right close to them. The whales will come close to the boat. It is, they've just, by definition of being so isolated, they've been so protected. And I guess I think there's a small freeze there. The other thing I was going to say, and Eric alluded to this, is the history there. Again, I think appreciating Antarctica is looking into some of that early exploration down there. And it's just quite extra. With my father, we went back and I was quite close to where Shackleton did his famous voyage from Elephant Island to save his crew. And I think just wrapping your head around what some of that history was, I think we'll kind of start to put a bit of a framework around the environment. You kind of go, okay, that was a long way to go in a boat. The Drake's Passage is often nicknamed the Drake Shake, and some of the roughest parts of the world. And you can see it in Master and Commander, that film. And it's horrendous. It's horrendous on a modern day ship that's got internal stabilization and ballasts. And then you kind of go, okay, imagine a wooden dinghy, and he's doing it with a sextant. And it's just, that's kind of, I think, when your brain starts to kind of really, you can kind of get those spiritual moments that you're talking about.
Well, I think the lack of culture and the lack of people, I think, is sort of what draws me there, because there's in my mind, no untouched place anymore. And that's kind of the only place that you can, it's pure energy in my mind. That's how I see it. It's Mother Nature in her finest. It's what, maybe Earth was at one time. I don't even know without humans what it would be like. And so in a way, it feels like going to the moon or something, just like this out of this world kind of experience that is just pure energy. And so that's what fascinates me about it. So I love hearing your guys' stories, and it's really incredible. I can't imagine being on that passage on that boat. I've been in about 50-foot swells in between some islands in Indonesia before. And that was the most scared I've ever been on the water. And I was in like warm weather. So when you put the cold factor into it, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, it is these moments. I mean, look, you're reasonably safe on these ships, but it doesn't take much to kind of think, well, my whole faith is in this bit of engineering. We're actually on a fun ship, actually. It was a ship that was repurposed from the Russian mafia. The Russian mafia got a hold of it. No, it was a Russian warship, I think, first in the Cold War.
It was a spy ship first.
Spy ship
and then
first.
repurposed.
And then repurposed by the Russian mafia, used to smuggle cars from Japan to Vladivostok. And then now it's been picked up by this tour company and refurbished.
Oh wait, you skipped part of the history though. After it was shipping cars, then it was parked and dry docked and was used as a brothel for about a decade. And it was a floating brothel, then repurposed for the ship we were on. So spy ship, Russian mafia, car shipping, container, brothel, our transportation.
It had this double hull, which if you've watched the Titanic, the double hull is the key to if you hit an iceberg and you rip through that first hull. So yeah, it's this kind of little bit of special ship engineering that we're on. But you're right, you're sitting there in the Drake Passage going, I hope this engineering works, because that's all I've got.
Oh, it's so funny. It's what of all the projects you've worked on, do you guys have a favorite?
Yeah, we have different ones. If you want to go first, Eric.
What's mine?
Mine. Well, I'll go first then, and you can rack your brain for yours.
What have I said before? What have I said before?
I look, Antarctica is up there because of its kind of just, it is so unique and so rare to have gone there. But I think I keep coming back to what we did in northern China. And again, I think that is just the connection to people and kind of what we were doing there. And I now realize kind of in hindsight, the access to that part of the world we had. I don't think I'll ever get back up there or get back into China even. I mean, the politics, particularly around Australia and the coronavirus, have changed. And so there's this small window in history that I kind of slipped into and a little bit unawares at the time. And now I read a lot about it. So Xinjiang has an interesting place. We were doing, for me, skiing is an old childhood passion of mine that I just love. And so to be able to kind of, it was the culture, it was the people, it was the place, it was the work. I told you that story earlier about the kind of having to really kind of change on the spot, and that kind of was the work I really loved. And so that sticks out as a favorite to me.
I don't know what's my favorite. I'm a collector of experiences, and every trip has different experiences. Pieces here I like, pieces I don't like. For me, I would say the next thing I do is the one that's gonna be my favorite, because I don't look back much unless I'm gonna monologue about a story like we are here. I look forward to the next thing, because it's just, I don't know if it's me or the way I intersect life or what, but man, it's always a crazy circus and it's insane. And I mean, so whatever the heck it is that I don't know what we're about to do, it's, and I think that's probably Viv's greatest fear, is I'm like, hey, I got an idea. But the things that I've experienced collecting, I can't even go through them all, but like I said, I walked up in the Xinjiang area that Viv's talking about, and I was the first white, this is not my words, but the guy there, the nomad with his family, the chief, says that you're the first white person, I think he meant like Westerner, white person I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, how's that even a thing anymore? How's that even possible? Because as you just said, humanity is everywhere. And then he decided he wanted to wrestle me to see how tough I was. And then, as Viv said, I bathed in the Ganges, and then and I almost back to the penguin stories. I almost exterminated an endangered species of penguins in Tasmania once by walking through its nesting grounds, and so the last bastion of these little fairy penguins, and I didn't know it, but so all these little weird things that happen along the way, and that I can take back and share with my children and my family, and share with Viv and my friends. For me, that's the most exciting trip we've been on. The most exciting experience I've ever had is just my chaotic, duct taped life.
So Eric, I was reading on your website, just kind of getting to know you better, even though I've had coffee with you a few times. I think I met you at a backyard party barbecue of a co-friend of ours. And I read that you studied molecular biology, and I thought that's funny. That's a lot different than production, being more of a creative mind and then having the scientific mind. And I always think, and I'm just naturally drawn to people who are what I call whole brain thinkers. And so when I read that, I was like, that's why I went to coffee with that guy, because he's a whole brain thinker. And I didn't realize that. But tell us how did you jump from science to production?
First, I think Viv would argue with you about the whole brain usage. I think she could point out some points where it's been maybe no brain used. But yeah, so it's been a strange path, hasn't it? I went to college. I was told that I should consider the military. College wasn't for me. I wasn't smart enough in high school. And so I considered going into the military and going and doing wherever that took me. And my father, having been a Vietnam veteran who did an unfortunate tour there, said, man, just give college a go do it. So I ended up in college, wholly unprepared for college, and was pretty much on the dean's list by my second year, which was the dean's list that you get that says if you don't get your grades up, you're getting kicked out. That list. Nobody talks about that list. And so I decided at some point in my, skipping along through college, I decided at some point, all right, I'm here. What am I going to do? And I decide that I'm gonna try and find the thing I think is the hardest thing possible to do. What looks like I just don't know anything about it. It's gonna and I literally just wanted to come out of college and say, man, look, I did that badass thing. It was cool, like climbing a mountain. I did it, and so I chose molecular biology. And I kind of found some love in plant molecular biology. And to be honest, it's because you can manipulate plants and genetically modify them and cut them up and smash them and kill them. And that was awesome. No one cared. So we got to do a lot of cool stuff with plants. And then I was like, okay, what next? And I was going to go into the Peace Corps at that point. And I met this woman in college, and I was like, Peace Corps, I wonder what she's doing. And she's going to go to graduate school. That's my wife. And I just said, oh, well, what the hell? I'll go to graduate school. Sounds cool. I can stay in school longer. I don't have to actually get a real job. And I got a couple little jobs, and they allowed me to teach at the university at that point, which I thought was incredibly ridiculous. And I began teaching college some classes there as a graduate student, and I got my graduate degree in molecular genetics and did some stuff you don't want to hear about just because it's boring. And I ended up getting a job at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center here in Seattle, and working in one of the most prominent labs there, and ended up doing some cutting edge research that was like, we're doing some of that research with a bunch of postdocs and MD, PhDs from Johns Hopkins and stuff. And I was working with these guys, and it's just one of these things where I made a bunch of choices and ended up in the weirdest place imaginable. So I did all that stuff, and I got into adventure racing around that time. And adventure racing is this kind of super insane multi-discipline sport with no real route. You mountain bike, you paddle, you climb mountains, you go down rivers, caves, etc. And you do it nonstop, always on the clock for like 5-10 days straight. And whoever wins is usually whoever can survive it. I got into that. It was kind of fun. And then I needed to raise sponsorship for my team, my racing team, because you do it as a group. And it's not a relay. You literally all do the 400 kilometers nonstop. And I started filming it. And I started filming it to get sponsorship. And as time went on, I just developed better ways to film it, better ways to capture the story. And I was out running around in Yosemite on the rocks, bouncing around with a camera, a one-man production team, 24 hours, day after day in the wilds, unsupported. And I ran into a guy who knew a guy who was doing a television show. And he said, you should give this guy a call. I think he could use somebody like you. And so I called him up, and he said, hey, can you be in Tasmania in 2 weeks? And, I turned to my wife and I go, hey, I'm thinking about going to Tasmania. I'm going to be gone a month and I got to leave in 2 weeks. And she's like, well, holy shit. And I go ahead and I do it. And I end up, as I said, doing that. Ecuador, meeting Viv in New Zealand, end up going to, Viv and I are hitting New Zealand, South Africa, Switzerland, et cetera, et cetera. And that is how I got here and doing what we're doing.
I love that you just decided to drop everything and go to Tasmania. And I love even more that your wife was just cool with it. That's
if you remember, she met me back in college before adventure racing, before any of this other stuff. So at that point, she realized who she had married. And, I guess she was wanted to stick around. She had, by all means, throughout the, 25 years we've been together, she's had every reason not to be here.
That's why I'm remarried. Viv, tell me about your how you ended up, making the choices that you made that brought you, this creative, adventurous lifestyle.
Yeah, well, my story is going to be 20 years shorter than Eric's. That's one of the interesting things about, I guess, our partnership is we like to say that we are proving we're the model, we're the post Me Too model where you can work happily, functionally, positively, a guy and a girl without having to abuse that. So we take a lot of pride in the fact that there's 20 years between us. There's a gender gap, there's a cultural gap, but we make it work. So anyway, putting a pin in that thought, because you can make a whole podcast on that. Mine is, as I said, it's a little slightly shorter story, but I grew up in a family that threw me in the outdoors, and I was often jealous of the kids going over to Disneyland on holidays, and mum was packing us into a tent and making us walk for days on hikes and family bike rides. And so it's one of those things as a kid that I remember groaning about and just being like, oh, I want to go to Disneyland. And now I'm, of course, incredibly appreciative of it and wouldn't want to touch Disneyland with a 10-foot pole, and I would happily throw myself out into the mountains. So that was, I guess, that's the kind of the childhood thing. Early on, I kind of just was always kind of making stuff, and then a camera fell in my hands. I was probably on like a 7th or 8th birthday, and then there was film clubs at school, and so I was pretty kind of a bit one-tracked on making films and telling stories. And And look, the embarrassing stories are I used to put on plays at home and make my sisters perform in them. And so there's been that kind of rumbling away. And then I just pursued film school. I took an exchange program over to Paris where I continued my film studies. That was a vast cultural shift. In Australia, we have a model similar to the US in terms of education and just make stuff. We were constantly filming in Australia and editing and animating and drawing. It was very hands-on. And so my final semester over in Paris was quite a shock because it was very academic. I don't think I touched a camera the whole time in Paris. And I just wrote long essays about David Lean and The Shining. I wrote an essay in French on The Shining and Lawrence of Arabia, and it was wonderful, but it was very academic. And of course, my French being my second language, I'd lose points on an accent going the wrong way. And I was like, yes, but I know I made the point about the shot and the angle. So that was a really kind of, I enjoyed it, but it was a very different experience, educational experience. And then I came back actually I was flying back from Paris, and I still had a couple of subjects to tidy up, just because exchange often throws your schedule out. So I think I had 2 subjects to go, but I basically needed a job. And just started applying for junior positions in the industry, anything. Editing was something I had developed in college, and so I was just trying to get any job in the industry. And that's when I got that job at that production company that Eric had mentioned before. He was just about to start making a TV show, doing this adventure racing TV show. And he hired, that's the 2 juniors I spoke about that he hired. It was myself and this other fellow. And we both kind of walk in, fresh-faced 20-year-olds in our first job, eager to prove. And that's, I think it was, I got hired on the Friday afternoon. He said, start on the interview was on Thursday. I got hired on Friday. I started Monday kind of thing. And that Monday morning was the question about the passport. 2 weeks later, I was standing, knee deep in a river in New Zealand with Eric. So that was, again, it's super hard to replicate. I mean, the degree I did, it doesn't even exist anymore. They've kind of remodeled the whole program over there. So the idea of replicating this path is unfortunately impossible, other than just kind of be ready for random stuff and put your name out. So that's kind of how, as I said, a much shorter story, but that's
I love it. I always love to hear how people got to where they are, because there's always, life is just, I always say, well, this isn't my saying actually, but a friend of mine says life is a series of near misses. And I feel like that's really true in a lot of ways. But if you're fearful of those near misses, you'll never really fully experience the really great and magical things about timing. And, especially when you're traveling, you find yourself in really strange situations sometimes. And you're like, okay, how am I going to get, to where I need to go next? And so I think that, like, clearly you guys don't have that fear of those near misses, and you're really, you operate off of inspiration. It's cool.
I think, Viv was talking about her mother and taking her into the, camping, etc. I think a lot of that comes from your upbringing, whether you're brought up by your parents or someone else. For me, I feel that when you reach those situations, near misses, how you react to those really guides your life. If you're a kid who's been taught to be disappointed about those things, upset about them, then that's what you're going to find: disappointment and being upset, and you're not going to be motivated to take action. In my upbringing, I was taught, not directly, no one ever said, hey, Eric, go take an opportunity and transform it. But that was the writing on the wall for, we were really, really poor. And so you want to eat, find some food. It's an opportunity to find what is edible. Not joking. We would go and forage along the beach for what's edible. And now that became an opportunity. You don't sit there and be disappointed and starve to death. That just doesn't make any sense. So why would that make sense in any other decision in your life? If you're failing right now, but look at how you can make an opportunity about what's left of the remnants and do that. And so I think a lot of these kinds of, the way Viv and I take a look at life is fortunately our intends to be your mother, at least in our cases, teaches you how to look and approach life and how to tackle it by example or otherwise.
I think it's actually, just if I throw one point in there, I know that we told these origin stories, and again, they have this ability to kind of feel like, you know, life's slotted in at these amazing moments. But the real story for me actually starts, I guess it starts to get interesting at that job, because my boss sexually harassed me for like 2 years, and it took me, this was all pre Harvey Weinstein, and there was no language around it, and I thought it was just a unique thing that was happening to me. Of course, I was the only woman in the crew, so none of the other men were experiencing the same thing, so there was no kind of talking about it. And again, it was as these things go, as we're now more and more familiar with these stories, I was doing such an amazing job. So on face value, I'm sorry, not I personally wasn't doing a job. I had an amazing job in the sense that I was being flying out of helicopters over the Swiss Alps. We were up in Nepal filming the world's highest marathon. I was going to Japan. I was going to, you know, Costa Rica and Africa. So it's like kind of like, why would I speak up about this? Is this even a bad thing? Or if, you know, why would I give up this job? And so it was this, we all are so familiar with that power, abusive power that ends up happening is when your boss has that kind of control over you. So there were a number of reasons, particularly towards the end when it got particularly bad. There were a lot of reasons for me to quit and give up, and ultimately I did end up having to quit because it was unsafe. And then at the end of that, you know, I just kind of walked away from what I thought was the dream job, and I would never get that opportunity again. And it did take some time to rebuild that. So in every story, I know that the danger of doing these glossy over stories of like, you know, this is my life story and this is how I ended up where I am. There's a lot of kind of forged in fire and having to kind of really look at yourself in the mirror and go, well, is this the dream job if I'm being sexually harassed? And how do I get this back in a position where I'm not abused? And that's kind of how Eric and I built 1iOPEN Productions. There was about a year where I was working at an advertising agency in Sydney doing work that was interesting, and I take that work into my career now, but it's not where I wanted to be. And yeah, and Eric and I were like, well, let's see if we can build something out of this. And it wasn't easy. The first couple of jobs, we barely made a profit, and you're trying to get ourselves out there. And we took some jobs just so that we could generate content and get our name out there. We made additional films, and we made additional YouTube content and put that, and we made stuff that we made for TV. We made it cut so that it could go, you know, into film festivals. So we were kind of constantly doing this push, and it sounds now like kind of 5-6 years later, like, yeah, all these wonderful pieces fell in place. But just going back to what Eric was saying, what you had alluded to as well, it's there are these moments to quit, and it's what you do.
I remember I went to school for broadcast journalism, much like you. It sounds like I kind of always thought I was going to be a journalist. I was going to be a writer. I went to school and I started working my freshman year at University of Washington. I got a job at Como TV. It's the ABC News affiliate in Seattle. And it was a great opportunity for a 19-year-old girl, it was, but I was the youngest one at the station. I was the only girl on the production team. There were other women in the newsroom for sure, but on production, it was almost all men. I think there was one other girl, Lakeisha, that we worked with for about 7 years. I worked with her, and I remember working at tons of different stations and different networks, and something happened that one day I just walked out of the news station at Fox News and I quit. I never went back, and it was very confusing for me. It was right after 9/11, and a lot of the things that happened at the station really brought to light what news media broadcast is about, how fear-based it was. And in my opinion, I was just part of a machine that I wasn't proud of anymore. And, it was heartbreaking for me to make that decision and say, I'm going to take a different path. And, found lots of very random projects to work on through the years, but like my career as a journalist really halted then. And it was hard and it was unexpected. But I'm gonna say that I'm really happy that I made that decision to break out of the network and just to become an independent. Back then, we didn't, that was 2000 and, what year was 9/11?
2001.
2001, yeah. So it was 2001, and you know, like we didn't have social media like we do now, and you know, we didn't have a lot of these avenues to be an independent journalist, and so you know, it was lots of tough roads to see, you know, where my career would take me or whatever. But I agree. I think that like talking about the good parts and the bad parts are it's important, because without that like jolt of you know what, I'm going to take this in a different direction than what I dreamed of as a child, you know. And it takes a lot of courage to do that too.
Yeah, I think, you know, you take all that, and then you take like Viv. We were in Costa Rica. She was trapped in a country where someone controlled her flights in and out, you know, our boss. She was, you know, what do you do? I quit and stomp off where, into the jungle and die? I mean, the options were zero. And so, you know, yeah, she had to make a pretty big decision, and then had to go back. She couldn't make the decision to walk off, right? And so I had to go back to the office and spend more time there. And it was, we all ended up quitting. The whole crew quit as derivatives of this bullshit. And I think, you know, for me, being, you know, an older male, I have to be honest, it was really hard to identify with what was going on. It's hard to see it. You can't, I couldn't even see it really. I mean, at the end you could, because it was pretty volatile. But you try to figure out, I don't understand, what is going on here? Why can't you control this? You know, why can't you deal with this? And so I learned a lot through the experiences that we had, the underbelly of all this fantastic bullshit we just told you. I learned a lot through all of this, and I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about Viv, who taught me a great deal, and has influenced how I raise my young women here. I have 2 daughters who are now adults. But it was pretty, Viv will remember this. This happened, and it wasn't until years later that it really sunk in with me. And we happened to be in China, and we happened to be sitting at a table with our Chinese clients. And, you know, they're all, I think, Viv's age or younger, so in their 20s, early 20s, something like this. And I'm, I think late mid 40s, I can't remember. And we're sitting there, and the guy across the table, he looks at me and he makes a joke that I'm sitting there doing what I'm doing right now, writing with a pen on a pad of paper. He goes, "What are you doing?" And I go, "Taking notes." And he laughed, and he made some off comment, I can't remember, about old people do that. And you know, and that young people do it on their phone. And I was like, you know, in my mind, it was like, F you. I said, "What the hell, buddy?" But then it dawned on me, and it really impacted me. I had no control over how old I was. And Viv had no control over being a woman. And that's when it connected to me, the feeling I had at that moment of, you're criticizing me for something I can't change, and you are judging me by it. And I got pissed. And it was and Viv, you know, that we had a good relationship, and later on turned to me and she was like, "See, it's exactly what I'm talking about." How's that taste?
He tried to come to me for some sympathy, but yeah. Welcome to the party, man. Come join. You can stand at the door. You've already just joined.
And it's, you know, it's, I think I think when we tell these stories, I know Viv has, written about these, the experiences we've had. We mostly tell the good stories and the good parts, but there's a lot of stuff that really, should be told, even beyond this story that we're talking about now. There is stories about how we negotiated with the Chinese, how we had falling out with a company we were part of in Australia. It goes on and on. There's a lot of stuff that occurred that are a lot of great teaching and moments that can be discussed. And I have to ask myself why we don't bring them up. Why didn't we just spend the last hour talking about those parts of
how
life?
How did you get into Mongolia, like into that area? How did it happen? Because I know when I was in the Altai Mountains, which I think are right across from where you guys were.
Well, that's where we were. We were in the Altai Mountains.
Okay, so I've been
Mongolia.
to that area, and most of the borders are heavily guarded. I sat at a border for 6 hours one time waiting to cross with basically machine guns pointed at me. Not able, I couldn't bring out my cameras. I couldn't do anything. If I even went into my bag, I had to ask permission to go into my bag. So I know how serious some of these places are. And I was not able to get across that border because they somehow lost the visa that I had very carefully gone through a Russian attorney to obtain. And so I knew I even had a copy of it, and they just wouldn't let me through. And many people, indigenous people of the area have told me, the spirits just weren't allowing me to go through that day. So how did you make that magic happen? Because I think there's more to it than a lot of people realize.
Well, I think that the magic of getting in was we were working for the Chinese government through liaisons. So we had a lot of special privileges. But once you get into the rural area, the nomad or the border guard, he has no idea. Viv had to go to the bathroom at one point. We were moving in on a bus, and she was going to go to the bathroom, which meant she was going to cross the border with no papers. And I'm not talking the border into another country. I'm talking just one of these internal borders. And you could tell that. You should tell that.
Look, if you're familiar with any kind of travel to these remote areas, our Western gut is quite sensitive. And I'd eaten something funky for breakfast that I probably shouldn't have in hindsight. And I had an explosive situation to deal with, and it was not going to be pretty. And I basically had to get off this bus. We were being held at one of these internal checkpoints, and look, in hindsight, it was pretty dumb. But I just, when you feel that feeling, if anyone's traveled and you've felt Montezuma's Revenge or Delhi Belly, that it just takes over. And I ran through the checkpoint. There was a little outhouse dunny on the other side of the checkpoint. I just ran through it. I had guards, I had guns on me, I had people yelling, and I was just flying through that checkpoint. I was pointing at my bum, trying to get them to understand that I just please, I'm just going over there. I mean, look, you can laugh at it, but if you've been up there, that was a pretty seriously stupid thing to do. But
I believe she solicited them. Go ahead, shoot me.
I guess in my head, the pain of dealing with what was in my gut and what was about to not be in my gut was so bad that I just thought, I remember kind of thinking, it sounds really silly, but I remember thinking, look, just put me out of my misery. Anyway, look, it's a hard kind of story to tell, because anyone that's been, I guess, in the military in these situations, how can you joke about being shot? And I guess I don't. It's just, and this is the interesting thing about the travel we've done, is that there's just these bizarre scenarios and stories where you're on this diet that does not mesh with you. You're so uncomfortable. And you just kind of something's got to give one way or the other. It's either I've kind of explosively shit myself on this bus, or I take a chance at the toilet on the other side of the checkpoint. Fortunately, it was fine. They got the idea.
And how we move through these, checkpoints, it's one thing to get through the airports. It's one thing to get across the borders. We usually got that pretty fairly handled. It's when you get deeper inside, a lot of these countries, even China, the United States, the information isn't passed along, right? The deeper you get, the more you're nobody. I don't care what kind of rubber stamp you've got there. And so, we've had to, in the middle of the night, sit there and just be cool and negotiate with and talk with the border guards. We had a YouTuber exploring with Josh with us, and he's got, I don't know what he's got, like 4 million followers now or something. He was with us. We'd hired him to come out as an influencer, and he was getting chummy with them. They were talking like playing Xbox or something, and then people chill out and everything gets cool. And like I said, I wrestled this guy once to get access to the region, and we've done all kinds of pretty interesting discussions. Viv directed a short film we did and in that film we flew the highest altitude drone flight at the time, and the first civilian non-military drone flight in the Kashmir Jammu region of India, which is like one of the most highly militarized places in the world, with their them in Pakistan wanting to blow each other up. And we had papers and stuff, but in the end, I'm up there glad handing a guy, showing him pictures of my kids on the phone, and he's showing me pictures of where he comes from, and we're having a chat. And then at some point he just like, nah, this guy's cool, and we get to do our thing. It's a lot of those little micro conversations.
I will say, as a woman watching it, there are parts of the world that open up for men more so than men. A lot of these stories is Eric, that glad handing, that talking, that is done by Eric. And yeah, while we have always gone in under a production and we've been invited in and we have these kind of top officials, that small greasing of the wheels that happens, it's a very masculine world out there. And that's that stuff that's doors will only really open for Eric. And so it's just a brutal reality of the world. It's one of the reasons why we do work well as a team. And Eric I've been uninvited from dinners. There was a dinner in China where the producers and the directors were invited by the chief of the region and the local government. And then when they found out that the director was a woman, myself, they uninvited me, and they said, oh, it's a woman's only dinner. We're eating the special goat's head. And I said, well, my ovaries don't really get in the way of me eating goat. I'm pretty sure I can join in on goat eating, but it was not going to happen. Eric said that he wouldn't go unless Vivian went. And then they said, all right, well, no one goes. So it's funny. I said, all right, Eric, someone better go to this dinner, and you go. And then Eric, he went, and the whole time he only spoke about me. Which was hysterical, because then they went, well, we better meet this person. So I think I have a lot of faith and trust in Eric that we do work well as a team, and that, look, you can push your feminist agenda, but I think that we've done it in really kind of creative and beneficial ways. Like, there's no way we were going to strong arm our way into that dinner, but Eric did it in a way that was far more beneficial.
I think I agree with you. I mean, that particular border that I didn't get across, I was with a Navajo wisdom keeper who was a woman, and I was with a Mongolian indigenous woman, and myself. And, they, even though we had all the right things, they weren't going to budge. And we were being very, very nice. There was no reason for us not to get through, other than they just weren't going to let these 3 women through. And but I have to say, not passing that border was kind of the best thing that ever happened to me, because it changed the course of just like, okay, how are we going to accomplish our goal now? So it like, I don't have any regrets about it at all, but I do think that the sexual men-woman thing, it definitely played a role in that.
Yeah, it's people. I'm a super optimistic guy. You can do anything, make anything happen. But people will ask us, they'll go, "What's the world like?" Because we've seen a lot of it. What's the world like? What's going on out there? And I say, listen, it's a fantastically beautiful place to a degree. But if you want me to be honest, the world is a horrible place. People are poor. People are dying. They're starving. They live in poverty in every country around the world. They are desperate. They are, the women had almost zero value. If the poor have almost zero value, it's dog eat dog out there. It's bribery, money talks, nepotism is everywhere. And that paints a really, really difficult picture to sell for people to go out into the world. But it is absolutely true. And I'm sure people pull me up, but what about here? It's amazing. These people do this. And, I would say maybe go where we go, which is the places that people generally don't go, the more unlikely places. And you'll see rivers of garbage for miles. And so, it's not fair out there. It's not equal. And I think that men and women, I think we have to recognize that. We have to acknowledge it. And then we have to do something about it. And I love these great kind of global movements to change the world and stuff. And they have their impact. But where it's going to change? It's going to change right here in this conversation. It's going to change day by day as I walk the planet with Viv, with my wife. What I start to tell my kids about experiences I've had with Viv. That's where it's going to change. And I really have to say, if I can have a bit of a soapbox, which I just took, I would like to say that change is not going to come where we are today. Is not going to come from women walking around in groups saying we want rights. It's going to come from guys like me saying, hey, take a look at what's going on here, and being the voice. Right, we have the podium. The men do. We own the podium. And it's going to take people like myself and others saying something about this and articulating it and acknowledging it and giving opportunity where we see it. And I don't mean give it away. I mean on equal ground. If you've earned it, you've got it. And that's really, in my opinion, how this sort of thing is going to change when you cross the border or Viv crosses the border. It's got to come, from us talking to each other in our men's groups about this.
I love that you say that the change really comes from inside, because I think that's really true. And I think that I have a belief and just a commonality with people that have connected all over the world who are medicine people and shaman, and they hold these ancient wisdoms, and it all comes down to compassion and kindness and really ultimately love, love for our planet, love for ourselves, and love for each other. And so I think that the world can be a dark place, but maybe I'm just an eternal optimist, but I feel like these things and these conversations and, when you sit and you tell stories, I think it does make a difference.
But I think it will. I think it will over time, incrementally. Unfortunately, we're a pretty stubborn species. And don't forget, we are just another animal on this planet. So
that's right.
Yeah, it's going to take time for us to change and change how we do things. But as has been the theme of this entire conversation, find the opportunities where you can do something, make the best of it, do your best. You're going to fall short. You're not. Listen, I'm sitting here pontificating about this is how you should do things. Hell, I'm going to say something sexist or ridiculous probably in the next hour, guaranteed, somewhere with somebody. Anyway, we're human. No one's perfect. So don't bludgeon the crap out of somebody when they do something a little bit stupid. Try and teach them a different way to do it. And as everybody said here, have some patience and keep going after it. Find the opportunity.
Yeah, just make a positive difference in your day, and your weeks get better and your months get better, and all of a sudden you have all these stories from years of adventures.
I like to tell people, it's keep going. It's tough. This is what I've experienced, but this is how I've kind of solved it. So I feel like you've touched on the stuff that I like to talk about and the messages that I like to get out. So
cool.
Yeah, thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm honored to be connected to you guys, and it's really delightful. I absolutely love your stories, and I would bump into you in a backyard barbecue any day.
Awesome. I look forward to getting back to America and meeting you in person as well.
Yes, same. I think, so kind of off subject, I'm venturing into some portals in Shasta with a shaman in May. And I don't know if I really want to document it. I think I want to hire maybe just one of you to come. I don't know how you guys work, but I know that the work that I've done all over the world, and when I try to document it, I get too caught up in what I'm doing, and I'm not being a good, even though I know production, I know it, I'm not like, I need another, and I just want to throw that out there. And
where is it? You said
Mount Shasta.
Mount Shasta. Yeah, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, the short answer is we entertain and seriously consider all projects that involve the world and people and things like that. So
a little bit more on that, and it really depends on what the heck you want to do. I mean, if you want to make a short film-esque thing of it, or if you just want like a YouTube video like the ones you see we slapped together, you probably, I mean, something like that for a few days. I mean, on the low end, you're probably talking $5-10 and we've shot 2-minute pieces for $35,000.
So let me just flesh this out a little bit. I just want to know if it was something that you think you could possibly pull off, coming to Shasta in May.
What does that look like for you, Viv? What does May look like? I know it's uncertain, but
I'm the most uncertain. It's a high definite of getting Eric down there. Obviously, that's he can physically drive there in a couple of hours. I'm tied up in a bit of a mess that Trump created last year. My green card is approved, but needs to be processed, and that processing was delayed last year. So, look, I am in the wind. I am in the very much just floating in the nebula, waiting for my call up for my interview, and then I get the green card, which could happen anytime between tomorrow and June. So, you can probably look. The short answer is Eric can kind of film anything within that kind of Pacific Northwest radius, and so we can get something on film for you. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm just really curious because this shaman thinks that he opens up portals to like Venus and Arcturians and Lemurians and all this stuff, and I'm like, I gotta get this. Like, I really want to capture this,
Yeah, like, really. If there's a portal opening, we should get a camera on that. Yeah, awesome.
Okay, cool. Well, it's been a pleasure, and
it has been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks for your interest.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I guess Viv, your day.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to my virtual campfire. I'm humbled and grateful, and with heartfelt thanks, thank you for listening all the way to the end. I hope that it caused a vibration or a thought or sparked something inside of you to make a positive change.